because we have a lot to discuss here on This is Revolution. I want to bring up Kuba's topic, which is techno feudalism or neo feudalism or living in the late stages of capitalism. I
What comes next? And I think that um, this concept of techno feudalism became very popular as a result of some pieces and interviews that Yanis Varoufakis, the Syriza finance minister, former Syriza
former.
finance minister of Greece, um, gave to a number of different outlets, where he's a trained economist. He's on the left, but he has a very solid grounding in the models and concepts of
Mhm.
conventional neoliberal economics as well. So he is making an observation about where we are in capitalist development. This is how capitalism ends, not with a revolutionary bang, but with an evolutionary whimper, just as it displaced feudalism gradually, surreptitiously, until one day the bulk of human relations were market-based and feudalism was swept away. So capitalism today is being toppled by a new economic mode, techno-feudalism. And um, his observation here is based on the fact that financial markets have unmoored from real economic indicators. So you could have a 30% compression of the UK economy while the UK financial markets continue going up, up, and up. And when you observe the behavior of financial markets internationally, they're crazy. They are no longer um, they're no longer observing the rules that neoliberal economics, that conventional economics expects for them. Similarly, governments are behaving um, much more uh, generously, or they're much less cautious about different forms of stimulus and monetary expansion than they were in the past. The For him, this is a real smoking gun that the old rules of capitalism no longer apply, and then based on that, he's looking for what the new model, what the new sources of growth, what the new patterns are. And the techno part comes from the observation that platforms like Amazon, Facebook,
Mhm.
Google are monopoly institutions where you can extract value just from having this enclosed network, having these users that you basically sell to other interested parties, and that financial profits come from quantitative easing or from central banks pushing more and more money into the system, which can then be appropriated by peak interests. So that is his take on techno feudalism, and he sees essentially a move away from a production based economic system to one where the collusive relationship between central banks and these platform oligarchs has entrenched them, creating a self reinforcing um, power and wealth dominance at the top through these institutions. I When I heard this concept, I think that he's onto something. Certainly, the fact that financial markets are operating the way they do with irrational um, increases and the break of relationships between bonds and stocks, these very well established correlations that were supposed to be the kind of fundamental laws of economics, that the old capitalist model is over and there's something else happening. Um, I think that the feudalism part is actually underdeveloped. He undersells it. because along with the breakup of the old productionist um, style of capitalism, you have such concentrations of wealth at the top. There's 2,500 billionaires approximately in the world that represent a massive component, an unprecedented
And
component
that's up
of
from how many before, though? We've seen
the. So it's when you're looking at historical comparisons of the concentration of wealth, it's very difficult to make a kind of one-one comparison because you also have to factor in inflation.
Mhm.
Um, and the and it's not so much the number of billionaires. In fact, if the number of billionaires were 10 times as great or 100 times as great, it would be less concerning. But the fact that this small number of people control such a large proportion of global wealth. Not only that, but through the international system of tax shelters, and this got revealed in the Panama Papers. Thomas Piketty wrote about how much wealth is concealed, just vanishes in the Cayman Islands, vanishes offshore in Jersey, Guernsey, in the state of Delaware. Um, and the emergence of what are called family offices for billionaires and their kin. A family office is essentially a private bank that concentrates on making investments for the sake of a single family. And right now, family offices internationally have more capital under management than the hedge fund industry.
Jesus.
So, yes, and unlike the hedge fund industry, which in theory has open funds where,
Mhm.
right, teachers union can buy in, a family office is just there for the family, is just there for a single group of ultra wealthy
The Waltons, for
individuals.
example.
The Waltons, the Gateses, you know, you could um, you could pick any number of like famous families, and the most frightening aspect of this actually is the ones that you can't name, right? The people who have succeeded so well in amassing their wealth that the Pritzkers, that's a good example, but the ones that we don't name are the ones that not only have all of this power, but the invisibility and the anonymity that makes them particularly difficult
Because we
to
only
hold
have the same
accountable.
old names, right? We only have Jeff Bezos, and maybe you yell out Bill Gates, but generally, it's just the same old names that we relate to major companies that we know and
Yeah,
love.
the some billionaires can't help themselves and step into the public light either through political activism or vanity. Bezos, um, Branson, the Koch brothers, Bill Gates.
Mhm.
But for all of those, there's an order of magnitude more that value their anonymity and privacy to a sufficient extent that you just never hear about them. Um, Sometimes the family office, especially if it's there's a shortage of personality within the actual owners, sometimes the family office can take over, right? And then you have managers basically telling the family what's going to happen. But no matter what, this is the case of private familial centers of power. And that's where the feudalism comes in. You have a replay of the privatization of force and of power that came with the breakdown of the Roman Empire and the emergence of all of these individual centers of power where you have a lordly relationship with um, either your customers or your clients or especially your employees. The changes in American governance, especially the gutting of unions, the elimination of restrictions on what corporations can dictate to their employees, has reinforced that trend towards, frankly, like manorial type of power on the part of owners. And I think that, if we can't get the political implications out of the piece that Varoufakis wrote, there's a comic book called Lazarus that plays them out in to their logical conclusion, with um, global crisis leading to the collapse of states and their replacement by not corporations, but families who own corporations and who can mobilize the type of wealth and personnel that allows you to replace the coercive power of a state. We have oligarchies in Haiti, and I think that in some ways, if the Haitian oligarchy coalesces around one or two families, this would be how it would play out. A state that's already been hollowed out and can't provide services to its public, that doesn't fulfill its governance obligations, also loses its coercive monopoly. And the only people who have the domestic power to step in are personal, are families linked by personal connections. And nation states require some sense of national solidarity, some collective bonds in order to operate. And if you sever those bonds, which is what we're seeing happening, the atomization of individuals and the winnowing out, the hollowing out of government agencies, then there's got to be some other basis for cooperation that can be effective in reimposing order. And historically, one possibility is the family and the household around that family. In Lazarus,
I want to say we have a super chat. Shirley got a super chat. We should not ignore it.
Of course. The movement of these massive flows of capital is balkanizing humanity. And how can we be so sure we're living in the late stages of capitalism? If the next stage is techno-feudalism, that sounds even harsher. What will be the left's response? That's an excellent question. And if we are moving towards, it comes down to a coordination problem. If you want to govern a space, you need to have a way to organize people, to deploy force when necessary, and labor when necessary, in order to achieve your policy objectives. The left, as an organized force in that way, doesn't exist at a level that it could push back against things like powerful oligarch conglomerate, or even things like organized crime. And unless the left can achieve that level of cohesion and discipline, unless it can generate for itself Soviets or cadres or other types of organizations, a political party where people actually follow a policy line, where right now the Democrats complain that voters are insufficiently disciplined, that they're not voting like we need them to, but their establishment Democrats lose sight of the fact that discipline cuts both ways. You're also, the leadership and elected officials are not governing the way they're supposed to. Without that discipline, you don't have an organization. You have a collection of individuals that like the same color, but can be picked out, flipped, twisted, corrupted by people who actually do have some discipline.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.